The morning rain in Los Angeles felt different that day. It wasn't the usual drizzle that barely wet the sidewalks. This was heavy, angry rain that seemed to wash away all pretense and pride. Amara Okwu stood at the bus stop at 4:45 a.m., her thin jacket already soaked through. That's what it took every morning to get from South Central to Beverly Hills. 3 buses to cross from one world into another. She clutched her worn bag closer, checking for the third time that her cleaning supplies were there. Mrs. Victoria Henderson didn't like it when she used her expensive products. "Those are for people who matter," Victoria had said once, her voice sharp as broken glass. So Amara bought her own, even though it meant less food that week. The first bus arrived, pneumatic doors hissing open like a tired sigh. The driver, an older black man named Jerome, nodded at her. He knew her routine. Every morning, same time, same worn shoes, same tired eyes that held something Jerome couldn't quite place. If he'd known what those eyes had seen in operating rooms back in Lagos, saving lives with precision and skill, he might have understood the weight they carried. Before we continue with this incredible story of hidden strength and revealed truth, if you're enjoying what you're hearing, hit that subscribe button for more unbelievable African tales that will leave you speechless. As the bus rumbled through the awakening city, Amara allowed herself a moment to remember. 8 years ago, she was Dr. Amara Okawu, head of neurosurgery at Lagos University Teaching Hospital. Her hands, now raw from bleach and ammonia, had once held the most delicate instruments, navigating the mysterious pathways of the human brain. She had saved hundreds of lives, been celebrated in medical journals, had young doctors hanging on her every word during rounds. Then the violence came. Not the random violence that makes headlines, but the systematic, targeted kind. Her husband, also a doctor, had spoken out against government corruption in the health sector. One night, they came for him. Amara could still hear the sound of the door being kicked in, still feel her son David crying in her arms as she hid in the bedroom closet. They never saw her husband again. She fled with David, then only 3 years old, using everything they had saved to pay smugglers, to buy fake documents, to reach America where her sister had promised safety and opportunity. But America, she learned, had different ideas about who deserved opportunity. Her medical degree, her years of experience, her published papers, none of it mattered without the right stamps, the right connections, the right skin color in the right neighborhoods. The second bus was crowded with other early morning workers, janitors, kitchen staff, gardeners, all traveling from the margins to the center, from the places where they could afford to live to the places where they were needed, but not wanted. Amara recognized the tired solidarity in their faces. They didn't talk much, but there was understanding in their shared silence. By the time she reached the third bus, the one that climbed into the hills where houses grew larger and streets grew quieter, she had transformed. The brilliant surgeon was gone, replaced by the invisible cleaner. It was a performance she'd perfected over 5 years. Keep your head down. Don't speak unless spoken to. Never, ever reveal how much you understand. The Henderson mansion sat like a white castle against the morning sky, its windows glowing gold with the early sun. 3 stories of marble and glass, with a driveway that curved like a smile, and gardens that required 3 full-time workers to maintain. Amara had once calculated that the monthly water bill for those gardens could pay her rent for 3 months. She entered through the service entrance, as always. The kitchen staff was already there. Maria, the cook from Guatemala, gave her a small nod. They'd learned to communicate in gestures and glances, a language of the unseen. Victoria didn't like the help talking to each other. It leads to laziness, she'd say. Though what she really meant was it led to solidarity, and solidarity was dangerous. Amara changed into her uniform in the small bathroom by the laundry room. the gray dress and white apron that marked her as staff, as other, as less than. She caught her reflection in the mirror, and for just a moment, allowed herself to remember the white coat she once wore, her name embroidered in blue thread. Dr. Okwu, neurosurgery. Amara. Victoria's voice cut through the house like a blade. Why isn't the morning room ready? I have the charity board coming at 9. Amara hurried to the morning room, where Victoria stood in her silk robe, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. Victoria was 45, with the kind of preserved beauty that money could buy, subtle Botox, expensive highlights, a personal trainer 5 days a week. She ran a healthcare company, one of those consulting firms that helped hospitals optimize efficiency, which usually meant cutting staff and services. I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I'll have it ready right away, Amara said, keeping her voice soft, her accent thick. She'd learned to exaggerate her Nigerian accent, to stumble over certain words. It made her seem less threatening, less intelligent. It was what they expected. Honestly, Victoria said to whoever was on the phone, not bothering to lower her voice. You can't expect much from these people. I'm basically running a charity here, giving her work. Back in Africa, she'd probably be living in a mud hut. Amara's hands tightened on the mop handle, but she kept her face neutral. Victoria had no idea that Amara's family home in Lagos had been larger than this mansion, that her father had been a professor, her mother a judge. But that wasn't the story Victoria wanted, so it wasn't the story Amara told. The morning continued with its usual humiliations. Victoria insisted that Amara clean the bathroom tiles with a toothbrush, because that's the only way to really get them clean. She made her rewash already clean windows, because there was a spot only Victoria could see. She criticized how Amara folded the towels, how she arranged the flowers, how she walked too loudly across the marble floors. You people just don't understand quality, Victoria said at one point, running her finger along a spotless shelf. It's not your fault, really. It's cultural. In Africa, you don't have the same standards. Amara bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood. She thought of the surgical suite she'd overseen in Lagos, with its gleaming instruments and strict sterilization protocols. She thought of the paper she'd published on reducing postoperative infections in resource-limited settings, cited over 200 times. But she just nodded and said, "Yes, ma'am. I'll try harder." Around noon, Amara was cleaning the library when she heard a crash from upstairs. Then, a scream, not Victoria's imperious shriek, but something primal, terrified. Amara dropped her cleaning supplies and ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time. In the master bedroom, she found Sophie, Victoria's 16-year-old daughter, convulsing on the floor. Her body was rigid, foam at her mouth, eyes rolled back. Victoria was frozen, phone in hand, screaming incoherently. "Call 911, Amara commanded, her voice suddenly different. Authoritative, clear, the accent gone. But Victoria just stood there, paralyzed. Amara grabbed the phone from her and made the call herself, rattling off medical information with clinical precision. 16-year-old female, tonic-clonic seizure, duration approximately 2 minutes, no known history of epilepsy. While talking, she moved with practiced efficiency. She turned Sophie on her side, protecting her airway. She cushioned her head with a pillow, moved furniture away from her thrashing limbs. She checked her pulse, noted the color of her skin, observed the pattern of the convulsions. "What are you doing? Don't touch her." Victoria finally found her voice. "Your daughter is having a grand mal seizure," Amara said, not looking up. "If we don't position her properly, she could aspirate. See how her lips are turning blue? That's cyanosis. She's not getting enough oxygen." The seizure lasted another minute, the longest minute of Victoria's life. When it finally stopped, Sophie's body went limp. Amara immediately checked her breathing, her pulse, her pupils' response to light. She spoke to Sophie in a calm, steady voice, explaining what had happened, keeping her still. The ambulance is stuck in traffic, Victoria said, panic rising again. They said 20 minutes. She can't wait 20 minutes, Amara said. She looked at Sophie's face, noted the drooping of one side, the unequal pupils. Mrs. Henderson, your daughter may be having a stroke. We need to get her to the hospital now. A stroke? She's 16. Age doesn't matter if there's a clot or bleed in the brain. Get your keys. I'll carry her. Something in Amara's voice made Victoria obey. They got Sophie into Victoria's Mercedes, Amara cradling the girl in the back seat, continuously monitoring her vitals. She directed Victoria to Cedars-Sinai, the closest hospital with a comprehensive stroke center. Run the red lights, Amara commanded. I'll explain to the police if we're stopped. As they raced through the streets, Amara kept talking to Sophie, checking her responses, noting the progression of symptoms. She called ahead to the ER, again speaking with medical authority that made Victoria's head spin. This is Dr. Amara Okwu, she said, into the phone. I'm bringing in a 16-year-old female with suspected CVA, following generalized tonic-clonic seizure. GCS of 10, right-sided hemiparesis, pupils unequal and sluggish. ETA 5 minutes. Please have neuro standing by. At the hospital, Amara carried Sophie into the ER, shouting information to the medical team that materialized around them. She rattled off observations, timings, symptoms, with the precision of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. The ER attending, Dr. Morrison, looked at her with confusion and then recognition. Do I know you? He asked. I clean houses, Amara said, the weight of the admission heavy. But I was a neurosurgeon in Nigeria, Lagos University Teaching Hospital. Dr. Morrison's eyes widened. He'd heard of Lagos University Teaching Hospital. It was one of the best in West Africa, but there was no time for questions. Sophie needed immediate intervention. Come with us, Dr. Morrison said. Tell us everything you observed. For the next hour, Amara stood in the trauma bay, advising, observing, her trained eye catching details others might miss. When the neurosurgery team arrived, she conferred with them, suggesting specific scans, pointing out subtle symptoms. Her hands itched to hold a scalpel, to be the one saving this girl's life, instead of watching from the sidelines. It turned out Sophie had an arteriovenous malformation, a tangle of blood vessels in her brain that had likely been there since birth. It had ruptured, causing the seizure and stroke symptoms. She needed immediate surgery. Dr. Chen, the head of neurosurgery, pulled Amara aside. Dr. Morrison told me about you. Your observations probably saved this girl's life. The speed of intervention was crucial. Amara nodded. Professional, despite everything. The AVM was probably anterior, based on the seizure pattern. The right-sided weakness suggested left hemisphere involvement. You really were a neurosurgeon, Dr. Chen said. Not a question, but a statement of wonder. I am a neurosurgeon, Amara corrected quietly. I just can't practice here. Victoria, who had been standing frozen in the corner, finally spoke. You're a doctor? A brain surgeon? Amara turned to face her employer. For 5 years, she'd cleaned this woman's house, endured her insults, her condescension, her casual cruelty. She'd been treated as less than human, as ignorant, as worthless. And now, here in this hospital, the truth stood naked between them. Yes, Mrs. Henderson. I was head of neurosurgery at one of the best hospitals in West Africa. I've performed over 800 successful brain surgeries. I've published papers in international journals. I've trained dozens of surgeons who are now saving lives across the world. Her voice was steady, dignified. And for the past 5 years, I've cleaned your toilets because my medical degree isn't recognized here, and I need to feed my son. Victoria's face went through a series of transformations: shock, disbelief, shame, and something that might have been horror at her own behavior. She sank into a chair, looking suddenly older, smaller. All this time, the things I said, oh God, the things I said to you. Amara didn't respond. There was nothing to say that could undo 5 years of humiliation. Instead, she turned back to Dr. Chen. Sophie's going to need careful monitoring post-op. Watch for vasospasm around day 3. The location of the AVM makes her high risk. Dr. Chen nodded, then seemed to make a decision. Would you? Would you like to observe the surgery? I know you can't participate, but Amara's eyes filled with tears. She wouldn't let fall. I would like that very much. 6 hours later, Sophie's surgery was successful. Amara had stood in the observation room, her hands moving involuntarily as she watched, mirroring the movements she would have made. Several times, Dr. Chen had looked up at her, and she'd nodded or shaken her head slightly, confirming his choices. It was the closest she'd been to her true self in 5 years. When Sophie woke up in recovery, her first coherent word was Amara. She'd apparently heard Amara's voice during her semi-conscious state, remembered the calm authority that had cut through her mother's panic. Victoria hadn't left the hospital. She'd sat in the waiting room, making phone calls, but not the kind Amara expected. When Amara finally emerged from the observation room, Victoria approached her. I've been talking to lawyers, Victoria said. Immigration lawyers. And I've been talking to people on the medical board. There has to be a way to get your credentials recognized. Amara was too tired to hope. Mrs. Henderson, you don't understand. I've tried. The process costs thousands of dollars I don't have. I need to take exams that cost more than I make in 6 months. I need to do residency again. Years of training. And how would I support my son? I understand more than you think, Victoria said. I understand that I've been a monster, that I had a brilliant surgeon cleaning my house, and I treated her like she couldn't finish the sentence. Like an African, Amara supplied quietly. Like what you thought an African should be. Victoria nodded, tears streaming down her face. I run a healthcare company. I sit on hospital boards. I have connections, resources. I've spent my career talking about healthcare innovation and access, all while the most innovative solution was scrubbing my floors. She looked directly at Amara. Let me help, not out of charity, but out of justice, and selfishly, because the world needs surgeons like you. Amara wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. 5 years of degradation couldn't be erased with offers of help. But then she thought of David, her brilliant son, who was already showing interest in science. She thought of the hundreds of patients she could help if she could practice again. She thought of the young girl lying in recovery, who was alive because Amara had been in the right place at the right time. I'll think about it, she said. But Victoria wasn't done. There's more. I've already talked to Dr. Chen. Cedars-Sinai has an international medical graduate program. They can fast-track certain candidates, especially those with exceptional experience. Dr. Chen wants to sponsor you. You'd still have to do some residency, pass the boards, but it would be paid, and it would be shorter than starting from scratch. Amara's legs suddenly felt weak. She sat down hard on a waiting room chair. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? Victoria sat beside her, for the first time in 5 years sitting as an equal. Because every time I made you clean those bathroom tiles with a toothbrush, I was participating in a crime against talent, against humanity, against basic decency, because I perpetuated a system that wastes brilliance based on geography and skin color. Because my daughter is alive because of you. She paused, then added, and because I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror again. Over the next months, things moved with a speed that sometimes left Amara breathless. Victoria was true to her word, using her connections and resources to navigate the Byzantine immigration and medical certification systems. She hired tutors to help Amara prepare for the USMLE exams, paid for the exam fees, and even hired a babysitter for David so Amara could study. The exams themselves were almost anticlimactic. Amara's knowledge hadn't faded. If anything, her years of forced observation had made her hungrier for medical knowledge. She devoured textbooks, medical journals, online lectures. She passed all 3 steps of the USMLE on her first attempt, scoring in the 99th percentile. Dr. Chen advocated fiercely for her at Cedars-Sinai. He presented her case to the board, highlighting her publications, her surgical experience, her exceptional performance on the boards. He also quietly mentioned that having a surgeon with her background would significantly improve their diversity metrics and their ability to serve the large African immigrant population in Los Angeles. The residency was officially 3 years, but everyone understood it was more of a formality. Amara's skills were evident from her first day in the OR. Younger residents came to her for advice. Attendings consulted with her on complex cases. She became known for her steady hands and innovative approaches to difficult surgeries. Victoria, meanwhile, underwent her own transformation. She started a foundation to help internationally trained medical professionals navigate the U.S. healthcare system. She funded scholarships, paid for exam fees, and lobbied for policy changes. She and Amara developed an unexpected friendship built on mutual respect and Victoria's genuine desire to atone. Sophie, fully recovered, became one of Amara's biggest champions. She started a social media campaign about Amara's story that went viral, leading to news coverage and eventually a congressional hearing on the waste of international medical talent in America. 3 years later, on a morning that felt both ordinary and momentous, Amara stood in front of a mirror in the Cedars-Sinai Surgeon's Lounge. She was wearing scrubs, a surgical cap, and a white coat with her name embroidered on it. Dr. Amara Okwu, Maryland, neurosurgery. It had taken 8 years to get back here, to be who she'd always been. Her first surgery as a fully licensed attending physician in America was by cosmic irony or poetic justice, an AVM repair similar to Sophie's. The patient was a young African-American boy whose family had been told by another hospital that the surgery was too risky. As she scrubbed in, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, the loss of her husband, the flight from Nigeria, the years of cleaning houses, the daily humiliations, the moment when Sophie collapsed, the long road back to medicine. Every step had been painful, but every step had also been necessary. "Ready, Dr. Okwu?" the surgical nurse asked. Amara looked at her hands, steady and sure, the same hands that had saved lives in Lagos, that had scrubbed toilets in Beverly Hills, that had helped save Sophie Henderson. They were the hands of a survivor, a fighter, a healer. "I've been ready for 8 years, she said, and walked into the OR. The surgery was flawless. The boy woke up without complications, his grateful parents crying with relief. It made the local news, a feel-good story about a brilliant African surgeon who'd overcome incredible odds to practice medicine in America. But for Amara, the real victory was smaller and larger than any news story could capture. It was David, now 16, watching her leave for the hospital in her scrubs, pride shining in his eyes. It was the young Nigerian resident who sought her mentorship, seeing in her a possibility model. It was the African immigrant patients who cried with relief when they saw a doctor who looked like them, who understood their fears and their strength. 6 months later, at a medical conference where Amara was presenting a paper on innovative approaches to neurosurgery in resource-limited settings, she encountered Victoria in the audience. After the presentation, which received a standing ovation, Victoria approached her. "That was brilliant," Victoria said. "You're going to revolutionize the field." "I'm just sharing knowledge that already existed," Amara replied. "It just wasn't being heard because of who was speaking." Victoria nodded. "I've been thinking about that a lot, about all the brilliance we waste, all the voices we silence." She paused. "I wanted to tell you something. I've restructured my company. We now specifically recruit internationally trained medical professionals for consulting roles, people who understand healthcare from different perspectives." Amara smiled. "That's good to hear. I also wanted to ask you something," Victoria continued. "Would you consider joining our board? We need voices like yours, experiences like yours." 5 years ago, Amara had cleaned Victoria's house. Now Victoria was asking her to help run her company. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "I'll think about it," Amara said, the same words she'd used in the hospital years ago. But this time, they both knew she meant yes. As Amara walked away, heading to another surgery, another life to save, she thought about the proverb her father used to say, "However long the night, the dawn will break." Her night had been 8 years long, but the dawn when it came was brilliant. The truth about talent, she'd learned, was that it couldn't be destroyed by prejudice or poverty or paperwork. It could be suppressed, hidden, forced to clean toilets when it should be saving lives, but it couldn't be destroyed. Given the smallest opportunity, it would emerge, like a plant pushing through concrete, reaching for the sun. And in operating rooms across Los Angeles, in medical schools where she now guest lectured, in the homes of immigrant families who saw in her their own dreams reflected, Dr. Amara Okwu continued to prove that brilliance has no accent, no color, no birthplace. It only needs the chance to shine. Years later, when asked about her journey in interviews, Amara would always say the same thing. "I was never not a surgeon. Even when I was cleaning houses, I was a surgeon. Society just took a while to catch up to what I already knew." And in a mansion in Beverly Hills, where a new cleaning lady from El Salvador worked, Victoria Henderson made sure to ask her name, her story, her dreams, because Victoria had learned the hardest way possible that everyone has a story. And sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, wearing uniforms that make them invisible, waiting for someone to finally see them for who they really are. The last scene anyone remembered from this chapter of Amara's life was this. It was a Thursday morning, and Amara was performing a complex brain surgery on a child whose parents had been told there was no hope. Her team watched in awe as her hands moved with impossible precision, navigating neural pathways with the confidence of someone who'd found her way home after a long, difficult journey. "How do you do it?" her resident asked after the successful surgery. "How do you stay so calm, so focused?" Amara pulled off her surgical gloves and smiled. "When you've lost everything and survived, when you've been invisible and remained whole, when you've been told you're nothing and known you're everything, a surgery, no matter how complex, is simple. It's just about remembering who you are and doing what you were born to do." She walked out of the OR, past the recovery room, where her patient was waking up, past the waiting room, where grateful parents cried with relief, past the windows that looked out over Los Angeles, the city that had brought her to her knees, and then finally let her stand tall. Dr. Amara Okwu had come home, not to a place, but to herself. And that was the greatest surgery of all, the one where she'd carefully, painstakingly removed the false self that the world had forced her to wear, and revealed the brilliant truth beneath.